Hi everyone, my name is Raymond, host of the AI Workflow Collective Group. So this is part of our AI speaker series, where every month we're bringing expert guest speakers to share real insights on AI, learn AI tools, and AI automation. More information on our group and how to join is in the video description below. This month, I'm excited to introduce Nicholas Racz, author of Master the Future, Unleash the AI You Can't Replace. In his book, Nicholas delivers a very powerful message. AI isn't coming from everybody's job, just the people who fail to adapt. This is a practical 30-day program designed to help you build the human skills AI can't replace, like creativity, intuition, empathy, resilience, and adaptability. It's backed by neuroscience and built with a simple daily actions to create real measurable change. Before we start Nicholas' presentation, I'm going to show you his cinematic trailer for his book. Let's dive in.
Get away!
AI coming for your job? You should read Master the Future. It'll help you unleash the you AI can't replace.
Yeah?
What do the critics say?
They're calling it essential reading, actually. Master the Future, it's on Kindle now, and the first few chapters are free. Master the Future. Get it before it gets you. On Kindle now.
I'm here to talk to you about AI and how to prepare for what a lot of people believe will be the single greatest upheaval of the modern age. And I want to start, well, you've seen the video. And so here's what I'd like to know just to start. How many of you saw yourself, at least somewhat, in that guy who's being chased by the monsters? And I'd like to hear from you. Just put up your hand or wave if you could even relate to them, to that person a little bit. Anybody? No, not a
Sorry, can you
soul.
repeat the question again?
Yeah. How many of you saw yourself at least a little bit in that guy being chased by the monster? How many of you could relate at least a little bit in the anxiety and the fear that I think a lot of people have right now about what's going to happen in the coming years with AI? And I'm kind of curious to just by a show of hands, if anybody can relate a little bit. A little bit? Yeah, I think. Yeah, and me too, which is why I wrote the book originally, and I'm going to get into that. So let me just say that if you put up your hand, you're not alone. And the truth is that right now, the driver for many people who are exploring AI is at least partly fear. It's driven by fear of finding the tools that will make the biggest difference, which raises, a really crucial question, which is, what skills do you guys think will be the most decisive over the next 3 to 4 years? What are the skills, just a couple, that you think are going to be the most important? And for this, I'd really like to hear from you and see where you are on this. I'm going to ask you to write in the chat box or just say aloud. Either is fine if you're not muted, which is totally great. Whatever first comes to mind, what's that first big skill that you think is going to really make a difference in the next 3, 4 years? Yeah.
For me, I think it's empathy and connection. Because like AI can't really connect to you, but like through empathy and connection, there is something like right there, right? So yeah.
Completely agree. Yeah. Anybody else? 100%. Yeah.
If you're saying for humans, I think it'll be uh, the whole question about what does it mean to be human if you're no longer tied to a title of a job. If most people are unemployed, like what does that mean to be human?
Yeah. Yeah. That's not quite what I meant, but I think that's going down the line. But I think that's a real question that a lot of people are already asking themselves, which is what happens when we don't have jobs and when we don't associate ourselves with jobs. Do you have any sense of what skills you're going to need between now and then? Because I think for the next few years, there will be people with jobs, and there will be that effort to just try to keep working in the environment that we're going to be going down the next 3, 4
So I
years.
think it would be the willpower to ensure that you train AI such that it pushes back on you and that it purposely causes you to do critical thinking. I think the biggest tool to have right now would be discipline, so that you don't let your brain turn to mush and let AI do everything for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Discipline and critical thinking for sure. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else? I mean, those are all great. So, uh,
One thing I would say is probably like the menial tasks, that are these sort of simple administrative tasks that we do are probably going to be replaced by AI. But I think it's kind of like the internet. The internet was the last kind of big revolution, and it kind of opened up a lot of jobs as well. The internet, like all these brand new types of titles and roles and jobs opened up in the advent of a lot of companies moving online. So hopefully it's going to be something like that in this new AI revolution, that it will open up opportunities for people to continue working, because work is really meaningful as human beings, that we're connected to
yeah.
something, we're involved in something.
Yeah, no, I think you guys have some, and I couldn't agree more. I think with everything that you've said. Well, and here's where it gets interesting. I mean, the first skill, uh, they did a survey. Let me go. Last year, the World Economic Forum surveyed over 1,000 leading employers in 55 countries, representing something like 14 million workers, and they asked them exactly the same question. And this is what they said: the first skill, and this wasn't a surprise, that people listed would be AI literacy and AI tool fluency, which makes sense. That's really not very surprising. But then here's where it gets interesting. Here are the next four, and they're actually exactly the ones that you guys mentioned. Number two was critical thinking and judgment. Number three was adaptability, resilience, toughness, flexibility, the ability to adapt to a new environment and to find new ways to win. Number four, creativity and problem solving, which one of you mentioned,
Yes.
which is definitely something that, these are all skills. And finally, communication, leadership, network, teamwork, and empathy. And you mentioned empathy, and I think that these are all. And interestingly, even though there's, for a lot of people, there's this immense preoccupation at the moment with tech and, learning tools. What tool can I learn? And, so you see a lot of companies right now just desperately trying to figure out what tool they can incorporate into their business that they can survive. Entrepreneurs trying to figure out what tools they can learn just so that they're not left behind. It's interesting that even when, they did this massive survey, but they found this 4 of the 5 top areas were human qualities, exactly like you guys actually nailed. And it makes complete sense because throughout history, whenever society has been confronted by tidal change, whether it was the Industrial Revolution or it was the Great Depression, those are the qualities that have separated the winners from the losers. The ability to be creative, to pivot, all of those things. And those people who lost their jobs, their livelihoods, and those were the qualities that really separated the people who were winners from the people who were losers, those who lost their jobs and their livelihoods and were, essentially sort of like that, swept away. And there are many people like that. And those who had the ability to recognize opportunity and react and seize the moment and ride the wave, sort of a little bit like this guy. And does that sound about right? Because that sort of reflects what you guys are saying. And here's the good news, that just as you can learn AI literacy and tools and fluency, there are proven ways to enhance your creativity, how to problem solve better, your emotional and mental resilience, your positivity, your intuition, and even your luck, believe it or not, which is what I'm going to talk about and what my book is about. And the reason I wrote the book, really honestly, is because it's the question I was personally confronting. Though I study the sciences and health, I've got a degree in physiology and biochemistry from McGill and bailed out of McGill Medical School. And then I've spent my career as a writer and as a producer, and mostly as a writer, first in advertising for big global ad agencies, and then in television and film for big US networks and a couple of in Canada and in Britain around the world. And really what that's done is it's put me into 2 industries that were among the first to be heavily impacted by AI. Really canaries in the coal mine. And at some point in the middle of last year, just to tell you a little bit about myself, during my morning walks, my wife and I, Rachel, we go for morning walks before we start work. And I started talking about what I was seeing, for example, that I'd had 2 job interviews in the space of 3 weeks that were conducted by an AI. I mean, literally on screen with a voice. I'm not talking about typed exchanges. And it was completely dystopic. And not just because it was very awkward and it was very badly done, but because it was ominous. Because for me, it was really clearly a sign that this was the beginning of something. And when I started talking to Rachel about it on these walks, she asked me to stop because I was freaking her out. And it occurred to me that she and I were not alone, that a lot of people are quite scared or trying very hard, not to think about it, which leads me to what I'm going to talk about today, which is first, how do we shift from operating in a state of fear to one of being powerful? And second, how can we significantly get stronger at the key human skills that we just talked about, that you mentioned: creativity, resilience, intuition, and responsiveness, toughness. So I want to start with fear. And what I want to do is shift our conversation a little bit from the question that many people are asking right now. And I'm sure you hear it all the time. And you probably, even think about it, which is, how do I survive AI? To a much more inspiring question, which is, what do I actually want to achieve with my life? What is it that inspires me that AI could help me achieve? Does that make sense? So I want to try something with you right now, and I want you to actually do this. It's going to take about 3 minutes. It's a little exercise. I want you to just grab a piece of paper or open a notebook on your phone, or you can do it in your head. And I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And don't overthink them. Just don't censor yourself. Just write whatever comes to mind. This is just for you. You're not going to be asked to share. Well, you'd be asked to share, but you don't have to share. And here's the first question. Picture yourself 3 years from now, not surviving, not doing fine, but thriving in a world completely reshaped by AI. What does your life look like? And I just take 30 seconds and think about it. What does your life look like? What kind of values are you creating? What are you known for? Don't limit your thinking. Write it down. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds and be quiet. So has everybody had a bit of a chance to have something in their minds? Yes? Wave. Okay, cool. Somebody. All right, cool. So now, second question. To create that future, what kind of a person would you have to become? I know that's not usually the way we think of it, but who would you have to be to create that? And I'm hoping that what you saw was something inspiring for yourself, ideally. You'd like to think that 3-4 years from now you're doing something that's inspiring, and that's the idea. Uh, who would you have to become to actually have achieved that, to be doing that? More disciplined, more courageous, more creative, more resilient, more decisive. Write down a few of those traits. Write down 3 traits that you really see are important and that would be necessary to achieve those goals. Not AI tools, but 3 traits within yourself. What would they be? I'm going to give you 30 seconds again. And now I'm going to just let us go one step beyond that, and think even bigger. If you could be those 3 things that you just thought of at just an extraordinary level that you just wrote down for yourself, or that you just thought of, what would actually be possible for your life in 10 years? Where could you see yourself in 10 years? What kind of a contribution could you have made to other people and to the world? And what legacy would you be building that you'll leave behind ultimately? And I want you to take 30 seconds and write down whatever comes to you. And the bolder, the better. Feel free to create a future to live into right now. Does everybody have something in their minds? I'm seeing little nods. Okay, that's good. Now, if anybody wants to share something that they saw for themselves that inspired them, go ahead and just say so. You can just speak out. And if you don't want to, that's totally fine. Anybody? Okay, go for it, Susanna.
Yeah, I'll share. It's nobody's on camera anyways. I just so what I see for myself is like creating more events for connecting others and for more art events and like um so that's what I see for myself in the near future. Like I'm still doing the same things, but I've got big plans, like huge plans. And like and standing there, like, I'm seeing myself thriving, I have no problems whatsoever. I'm just flexible with the times. And the three things that I could see for myself is just be more accountable and be more responsible and like follow through with my word. Yeah. And then the next 10 years, oh, I'm not afraid. I know that I'm going to survive. I'm like these events are going to be super powerful and it's going to be revolutionary. Anyways, so
Brilliant. No,
that's
thanks
what
for
I
sharing.
feel. Yeah.
No, that's great. Anybody else? And you don't have to, and that's great. Thanks,
Yeah.
Susanna.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to move on. But if you saw something for yourself, that's great. And if you didn't, keep looking.
Sophia had her hand up too.
Oh, did she?
She
I'm
wanted
sorry.
to
Okay,
share.
thank you for
Yeah.
flagging that. Sophia,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thanks. That's okay. I think I come from a different point of view. So in 3 years, I will have amassed an army. I mean, everything's going to be over to my AI agents. So several thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of agents at that point. And in 10 years, that's going to totally take inner peace. I mean, just enough to amass just the 3 years to be able to withstand the next AI replacement wave that's going to come through. And then in 10 years, I don't know. I don't think any of us know what that's going to look like because it's certainly not going to be a legacy the way that we had planned it to be, right? So, I mean, full robotics will be in play at that point. Um, I don't know because it's a different type of dreaming, I think. But I know it won't be like the legacy dreaming, what I had thought it would have been when I thought about it 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's going to change. Things are changing rapidly, and
Yeah,
absolutely.
it certainly
Thanks for.
won't be like legacy businesses. It won't be that.
Okay,
I know
cool.
that. Yeah.
All right. No, that's great. Thanks. And I guess, one thing I'm hearing from what you're saying is being able to adapt and pivot is probably going to be a skill that you're going to have to develop to like be able to deal with the next 7, 8 years and create something amazing. Because times are going to just be changing faster and faster. So so now let's look at how we can enhance the skills that you're going to need to achieve those goals and how you're going to be able to do that. And I'm going to start with some great news that, like I said, there are really tools that you can employ to significantly enhance those skills. And moreover, that the brains that we have as adults are not fixed. And this is really important because, by the way, that's a very recent idea. For a very long time, until really about 15 years ago, scientists were really convinced that a person's brain stopped developing at around the age of 17. Basically, by the time you were midway through your teens, your brain was basically as effective as and was doing what it could. But that isn't so. And you can actually rewire your brain into your 50s and 60s, if not later. Scientists call it neuroplasticity, right? And that is, the ability of your brain matter to remold itself like plastic. And the definitive study on neuroplasticity also happens to be one of the great stories of modern science. And I'm going to talk about it a little, not just because it's a great story, but because I think it will help you see something for yourself. And it is called the London Cab Taxi Driver Brain Study. In the year 2000, a neuroscientist, by the name of Eleanor Maguire here at the University of College in London, who was really skeptical that you were born with the brain that you died with the brain that you'd had when you were 17, decided she was going to study it. She wanted to prove that actually your brain can continue to develop. So she set out to find a group of people who did one mental task so well at such an extraordinary level that she could actually use them to study brain development. And she settled on one particular bunch of people that had developed extraordinary memories. Not people who were born with extraordinary memories, but who had developed exceptional powers of recall as adults. And those were London black cab drivers, right? So people who drove black cabs in London. Why them? I'll tell you. Because to get your London cab permit, you have to memorize every single city street in central London. It's a city that was designed by the Romans 2,000 years ago, redesigned by the Anglo-Saxons, then the Ottomans, then the Normans, and then other people. You get the idea. It is literally a convoluted maze with tens of thousands of streets that wind in and out of each other. It is a maze. And what cab drivers have to learn to get their permit is something called the knowledge, which looks not quite like this. It's the funny version. And on average, it takes 3 to 4 years to learn. And when they scanned the brains of London cabbies, which is what they did, they found that their hippocampuses, the part of their brain involved in memory, were significantly larger than in ordinary people. Not quite like that, but it made me laugh. But not just that they found that the longer someone had been a taxi driver, the bigger that part of their brain had become. In other words, it wasn't that people with good memories were becoming London cab drivers, but that their work was literally rewiring their brain, even into their 50s and into their 60s, never mind when you're 20 or 30. So why do I start with this story? Because memory is a faculty which we largely view as genetic, like creativity, like intellect, like resilience. We mostly think of ourselves, I'm just not that creative. My mom has this great memory. I can't remember anything, right? But it's really not true. Memory is something that can be completely altered. You can literally go from having a completely average memory to literally having an extraordinary one that's just off the charts. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Here are 3 other skills that we talked about earlier on at the beginning that are going to be crucial in the next few years, that are human skills and that you can meaningfully enhance without becoming cab drivers. First, creativity, okay? Which is another faculty that we view as either having or not. I work in TV, I'm very creative. Other people work in computing, they're not that, whatever, right? And if you're an entrepreneur, this will be particularly interesting to you, right? Because creativity is something that more and more is going to be fundamental. And it has always been. If you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur, you always have to find creative ways of surviving and of thriving when other people are not able to be just as creative. In 2024, Ben Shofty, who is a neurosurgeon at Baylor Medical Center in Texas, got curious about what parts of the brain we're using when we're having our best ideas, because he wanted to know how we could become more creative. So what he did was recruit a large group of patients with severe epilepsy for a brain study. Why epilepsy patients? Let me tell you. Because when you have severe epilepsy, they implant really bad. They implant permanent electrodes permanently into your brain so that you can have treatment ongoingly. So what Shofty did was he hooked these people up to scanners, with their permission, of course, and he gave them creative tasks to do while they were hooked up. And then he watched where the activity was going on in their brains. And what he expected to find, what experts all expected he would find, was that the part of their brain that would light up during these tasks would be the prefrontal cortex. In other words, the very front of your brain, where a lot of our executive thinking happens, where a lot of the heavy lifting and logic thinking happens when you're trying to figure out problems and stuff. And let me show you a picture. And those are the blue areas on that slide, right? But that's not what he found. The area of the brain that lit up, which was on the left, the left side, the red slide, was a region called the default mode network, which you've probably never heard of, otherwise known by scientists as the daydreaming network. And they call it that because it's the part of the brain that comes to life when we're spacing out in the shower, or going for a walk in the woods, or doing meditation. In other words, sort of off in La La Land. So quick question for you. How many of you on this call would say that you get some of your best ideas while you're doing the dishes, or on a walk, or doing something completely unrelated to your work? Yeah, completely. I'm a writer. I do a lot of I'm totally stuck. I go for a walk, or I'll pick up I'll go for a bike ride or something, right? Or I'll go play tennis, something that gets me away from it. And then the moment comes. That is your default mode network at work. And what happens if you turn off your default mode network completely? Well, to find out, because he was curious about that as well, Shofty took those same epilepsy patients and he scooped that part of their brains out. Okay, no. He used electrical impulses to disrupt that part of their brains temporarily, of course. And what happened was intriguing. His subjects were still able to read a newspaper or hold a conversation or reason out a problem or drive a car, but their creativity was gone. When they were given the same problems to solve, creative problems, their answers became boring and conventional. But there's another way to disrupt, and here's what's really interesting. There's another way to disrupt your default mode network other than involving electrodes. And it's something we do all the time, every day, which is we distract ourselves in these quiet moments. We distract ourselves when we're spacing out, and we interrupt the default mode network. And we all do it. We're all guilty of it. And in fact, what they've done is they did brain scans of people who are seriously addicted to social media. And what they found is that those people who are seriously addicted, hello? Hello? I heard somebody call out. Okay. And what they found when they did brain scans of those people is that their default mode networks had ceased to function at all. So if you want to enhance your creative output, not a little bit, but meaningfully, if you're after the kind of nonlinear results that require true creativity, true inspired moments of genius, protect your idle time, protect the spacing out time, structure your day and your life to create opportunities for that part of your brain that has your best ideas to function. Begin to view it and its importance the way you view regular exercise and maintaining your physical well-being. Make sense? So now how about luck? I just said that unwittingly. Is it possible to learn to be luckier? We all want to be luckier, right? And I have to admit, funnily enough, and this is completely true, that one of the things I've always wanted to be more than anything is lucky. I was doing an exercise with a performance coach, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And they asked me during one of our little talks if there was one way I'd love to be thought of by others, right? And in the spur of the moment, not even thinking, I just went, yeah, I'd like to be happy-go-lucky. And she burst out laughing because I couldn't have been further from happy-go-lucky if I tried. I've always been a grinder. I've always been able to achieve results. I get results, but through focus and through perseverance, just trying harder than other people. So try this on. You can actually train yourself to become more lucky. Is there anybody on this call who would not like to be more lucky? I mean, it's a stupid question, isn't it? So the person who proved that you could do this was a British psychologist by the name of Richard Wiseman. And Wiseman became obsessed by the basic question, which a lot of us probably have asked ourselves: why are some people luckier than others? Why did he ask himself that? Well, when Wiseman was a kid, he went into a library one day looking for a book on the history of chess for some school assignment. And he took a wrong turn in the library, and they ended up finding a book on magic tricks. Right? And so he flash forward and he gets obsessed with magic tricks, and flash forward a couple of years and he's a 15-year-old and he's doing magic tricks in Covent Garden here in London, where all the tourists are to earn extra gas money and drinking money and whatever. And he noticed something as he's doing all these magic tricks. And if you've ever been at the Covent Garden, and you have them on Granville Island as well in Vancouver, there'll be a lot of people gathered around, and there'll be, and what he noticed was that when he was performing for these large audiences, there are always some people who could pick off what he was doing. They could just pick off the trick, and they could always tell what was happening. And then there were always others who were totally clueless no matter what, right? Which got him wondering, well, was there something about the way these people were paying attention that made them luckier than other people? So flash forward another 8-10 years, and he's a professor of surprise psychology, right, and here in England. And he decides he's going to find out once and for all. So he conducts what is now considered the seminal study on luck, and it's called the luck experiments. And so here's what he does, and it's brilliant. He recruits 240 people. Half of them describe themselves as extremely lucky, blessed. The other half say they're essentially cursed, routinely crash their cars. A couple of them are uninsurable, lose their wallet, lose money in the stock market. And so this is what he does with them. In the first experiment, he didn't number them. In his first experiment, he hands each of these people the very same newspaper, the front section of a newspaper, and asks them to count the number of photographs inside, right? Now, the unlucky people all respond pretty much the same way. They leaf through the paper in about 2 minutes, carefully counting out the number of photos to make sure they didn't miss it. And it takes them roughly 2 minutes to go through and count to get the number more or less right. Then he does the same thing with the people who consider themselves lucky. Most of them finish in 5 seconds, 5 seconds, not 2 minutes. Why? Okay, because Wiseman had printed this on the inside of page 2 of the newspaper. Can you see it? Stop counting. There are 43 photographs in this newspaper. Not one unlucky person noticed that headline, not one. Meanwhile, most of the lucky ones picked it off instantly, right? And just stopped and said 43. Same paper, same instruction, totally different outcome. And when you repeated different versions of this experiment with money and with other things, he found pretty much the same thing. So he developed this theory, which was that people who thought of themselves as lucky viewed things in a more open way, that they were less singularly focused on a single end result. They were more open to whatever came at them, right? Like opportunity, like that magic book that, for example, he found in the library like 15, 20 years earlier. And that was his theory anyway. So to prove it, he set up a 1-month luck school for the unlucky people, because if his theory was right, then all you needed to do was make someone become luckier. You could make somebody luckier by teaching them to widen their attention, to broaden their focus, right? That's a teachable skill. You can't teach somebody luck, but you can teach somebody to broaden their focus. And so he did that, and he took a bunch of the most unlucky people, and he put them into this course for 1 month. And after 1 month, 80% of these hopelessly cursed people said that they had a meaningful increase in their luck after just 1 month. And that luck continued in 30 days, which, by the way, is the length of the program in my book, but I digress. So you can rewire your memory, you can enhance your creativity, you can even train yourself to be luckier, which is crazy. Traits that we completely think of as immutable, that are at best okay enough that we're going to make it through life and we're going to have some successes, that you've got what you're born with essentially. Here's a fourth, and I think it's actually the most important. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know what the most common cause of failure is, whether it's in business or professionally or personally? Take a guess. You can just call out. Anybody? What is the most common cause of failure for most people, whether it's professionally or in business or even personally? Anybody?
Stop.
Lack of trust.
Lack of trust. Okay, keep going. Anybody else? There's no wrong answer, by the way.
To give up.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. Giving up, right? You sort of said the same thing by stop. Yeah, giving up. And that might sound a bit silly, but who here hasn't given up on something and looked back years later to realize that you were much closer to your goal than you thought you were at the time, right? That if you just kept going just a little bit longer, right, you would have actually gotten what you wanted, which brings me to the last of the skills that you can meaningfully expand to the point where it's virtually you're an unrecognizable person, which is resilience. And just like creativity and luck, it's one that we think of as a personality trait. Some people are tougher, they're born tougher. Other people are I'm a wimp, I can't do it. You know what I mean? But in fact, there are activities that are readily available that can massively enhance your brain's capacity for resilience, for problem solving, for calmness, even positivity. I think it was Sophia, you were talking about those things earlier, right? To the point where you will transform into somebody you do not even recognize, right? So I'm going to talk about one of these. I'm going to talk about one activity that you can do, but there are others, right? And this is just one that I can vouch for, which is why I bring it up. But the point isn't to take this activity up. It's that there are others and that it's possible. And it's not nearly as hard as you might think. And this is one that I can vouch for personally, because I started about 10 years ago and it's available to anybody. And yeah, rock climbing. There you go, rock climbing. It builds resilience. That's hard to believe, right? And good news, you don't have to be quite as extreme as this to get results. You can actually be a recreational rock climber like this and do just as well, right? And there have been a lot of studies actually on this, which I'm not going to talk about. And they found that that rock climbing actually literally alters your resilience and your mindfulness and all of these other qualities in a really measurable way, peer-reviewed studies from major universities. So now I took up the sport about 10 years ago, so very super late in life. Most people start when they're teenagers or in their 20s. Totally by accident, I was on a holiday with my family, and I got completely hooked. It was just a chance to get away from the children's pool for a couple of hours, and I got hooked, which was a bit unexpected because I've always been a pretty big guy. And so it never crossed my mind to take up an activity that involved overcoming gravity, frankly. But here it was, and I was totally surprised. But what surprised me even more was that after just a few months of rock climbing, and not terribly well, I started to notice something really dramatic in myself. I started noticing changes. I noticed that I became better at problem solving, at sticking with problems. In other words, at emotional and mental resilience. And I became much more positive as a person. When I bumped up against a problem, I didn't give up. I just knew that there'd be an answer, and I just had to pick away at it. Now, and they've proven this in studies, which we're not going to get into, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about rock climbing, because if you don't rock climb, it's not obvious why that would be. So to understand why rock climbing has disproportionately crazy impact on resilience and positivity and problem solving, much more than most sports, more than weightlifting, more than running, more than almost every other sport. And that's also been established. Here's what you have to know. So the challenge of rock climbing isn't overcoming gravity. Yes, you're climbing up, but it's actually not that. It's problem solving, because when you're climbing up a wall, or whether it's indoors in a gym or outside, it's really the sequence of things, how you grab things, where you put your foot, and then where you put your hand, that's really decisive. Because if you get them in the wrong order, then you're going to end up losing your balance and losing your grip and getting tired and falling off. So essentially, rock climbing is a lot, right? It really is a lot like working your way through a very large maze. A very large maze that, to be more precise, happens to be vertical. And that really describes sort of it's a mental exercise, right? And if you go into any climbing center anywhere in the world, whether it's in Vancouver, I've climbed in Vancouver, here in London or in Spain, what you'll see is pretty much the identical scene. You'll see a bunch of sweaty, scruffy rock climbers covered in chalk, gathered at the base of a climb, trying to figure out the best way to ascend a route. And in rock climbing, that activity, talking about how to climb a route, has a name. It's called projecting. In other words, they've turned their climb into a project. And the toughest part of each climb, in other words, sort of this, they have a very specific name for that. You're never going to guess what this is called. The toughest part of a climb is called a problem. I know, it's brilliant, right? Who would have guessed? And when a climber figures out how to solve that problem, they have a term for that too. And it's also going to make you laugh. They say, I solved the problem. Brilliant, right? In other words, rock climbers talk about sending a climb pretty much the same way that a structural engineer talks about building a hydroelectric dam, right? And the longer you climb, the more years you do it, the better you become, not just at climbing, that's obvious, but the more pathways your brain develops for solving problems, for overcoming challenges, for staying determined and becoming resilient, and staying positive, right? And that's true. And what they found, let me back up actually one, sorry. And that is exactly what neuroscientists saw when they scanned the brains of climbers, that the longer someone climbed, the more tenacious, resilient, mindful, and positive they became. And that those traits don't stay inside the climbing gym. Like I said, they extend to every part of your life, challenges at work, with your kids, like that person, difficult people in your life, and even problems with your business, when the world is being reshaped by AI. And to bring this home, I want us to do an exercise about the importance of resilience and the cost of giving up. I'd like you to think for an instant in your lives, about a time when you gave up, either too soon or for too long. And to inspire you, and just think for yourself, and to inspire you, I'm just going to go first, which is about 20 years ago. I'm in the movie business. I had a movie that was greenlit. It was going to be my first. We had millions of dollars committed, everything we needed. The word of the head of one of Canada's biggest film financiers. And this was going to be my first film. And we'd worked for nearly 3 years to get to that point. We had a top US investor, and we had a great well-known actor attached. And then they reneged at the last minute. Literally at the 12th hour, they pulled out, and I was crushed. And I stayed crushed, not for a few days or weeks, but it took me nearly a year before I pulled myself back off the ground and decided to try again with another film. And in retrospect, I probably should have tried again with that film much earlier. But by that time, everybody on that team had moved on, right? and the air had gone out of it. And it was really 3 years before I got my next film made, which was turned out to be my first feature film. And look, if you work in the film business, everybody in the film business who's been successful has a story like that. And so does everybody else, whether it's a business venture or a career dream that you let go of, or a special person you had, your eye on that didn't respond the way you wanted. We've all given up in some way. So I'm just going to give you 1 minute. And I want you to think of one in your life. And the more it's things, the better for this. I'm not going to ask you what it is. And if you think of it, just write down what giving up cost you. Okay. And I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. So does everybody have something? Let's see. I'm going to see a few heads bobbing. Everybody? Okay. So, and keep, you can take this until later on too. But I'm going to keep moving on. So here's the question. How long did it put you out of action? If you feel comfortable, just write down or just say out the number. Was it days? Was it weeks? Was it months? Was it years? Is it still something that you haven't gone back to? Does anybody want to say? I mean, I'll tell you honestly, it literally knocked me out for at least a year. Any takers? Don't feel obligated. Okay. Well, remember a little while back, about 10 minutes ago, when I showed you this picture, right? Of this guy standing on the side of, clinging desperately to the side of a rock. Looks a lot like the chief. That's actually Tommy Caldwell, and he's on the side of El Capitan, the Dawn Wall. And he and his partner, Kevin Jorgensen, made history by climbing the Dawn Wall. And they were the first to free climb it, which meant that they didn't use special devices. They did use rope, but that was all, just so that they wouldn't fall to their death. And they spent 7 years working on that route. Just to figure out how to get up it in one go. And then they spent their weekends, and that means they spent their weekends and their summers, all their free time, living at the foot of that rock at the foot of El Capitan, climbing, falling, trying again until they were ready to make their full ascent, which took 19 days. And for those 19 days, they slept on the side of the ledge. That's them, literally. And it took them 19 days to get up, but it gets better because 6 years before this, 6 years before they started this, actually, Tommy Caldwell, and before they climbed up, Tommy had a little accident. He was one of the world's best climbers at the time. He had a little accident. He was doing some woodworking in his shed, and he accidentally sawed off part of one of his fingers. The tip of his index finger, which, as you can imagine, is pretty handy if you're a professional rock climber clinging to these tiny little crops of rock 2,000 feet off the ground. And needless to say, absolutely everybody told him that he'd never do any serious climbing again. So now I want you to look at that item that you gave up on, whether it was for a week or for a month or even longer. What would it be like if the next time you hit a hurdle like that, it didn't throw you for a year or a month or even a day, but it literally stopped you for as long as you needed to get off the ground? In other words, an instant, literally an instant. And how would that kind of resilience benefit your business, your career goals, how you want to create agents, whatever it is, and everything else that you're going to be dealing with in the next few years? And what could you accomplish then with the help of AI rather than in the face of it? And that's really what my book is about. It's a 30-day plan to build exactly what we've been talking about today, the skills required to create that future you wrote down for yourself at the beginning of this talk, not in theory, but for real. So if you're interested, I invite you to take a look at the book. I've put the link for it in the chat. It's available on Amazon Kindle. The first few chapters are free. Thank you very much.